How worried are you about black voters showing up for President Biden in November?
Well, I'm not worried. I'm very concerned. And I have sat down with President Biden. I don't know. I saw those reports. I've also seen at least one report indicating that I have sat down with President Biden, and I did with him. And I've told him what my concerns are. I have no problem with the Biden administration and what it has done. My problem is that we have not been able to break through that MAGA wall.
Well, you heard it here, folks. Well, you heard it over there at CNN first, likely, and you're hearing it here again. One of Biden's closest allies, Democratic Congressman James Clyburn, is absolutely concerned about the upcoming 2024 presidential election, one in which we are going to likely experience a rematch between incumbent President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. Now, Clyburn isn't the only one who is concerned about this upcoming election. In fact, we're now learning that former President Barack Obama met with Joe Biden to air his concerns. Now, during a private lunch with Biden at the White House, Obama grew animated in discussing the 2024 election and former President Donald Trump's potential return to power, one of the people said, and has suggested to Biden's advisors that the campaign needs more top-level decision makers at its headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware, or it must empower the people already in place. So apparently Obama has been fundraising for Biden. He's been trying to help in any way he can. But this report is interesting because you have Obama trying to provide some advice to steer the Biden campaign in his mind, the right direction. Now, Obama has not recommended any specific individuals, but he has mentioned David Plouffe, who managed Obama's 2008 presidential race, as the type of senior strategist that the Biden campaign might need in order to steer the campaign in a better direction. The mention of Plouffe in particular irritates some longtime Biden aides because it was Plouffe who Obama dispatched, or Plouffe, I don't know if it's Plouffe or Plouffe, I don't really care, but he was the guy who Obama dispatched to warn Biden that he faced long odds if he decided to seek the presidency in 2016. The president was not encouraging, Biden wrote in his memoir, Promise Me, Dad. Now, during the lunch, Obama also noted the success of his re-election campaign and the success of the 2012 structure of his campaign. And look, I don't understand why Obama, maybe he said things that have not been reported, right? Maybe he said things to Biden that have not been reported. But guys, there was a big difference between campaign Obama, the hope and change Obama, the I understand your economic frustrations and I'm gonna pretend to do something about it if I get reelected Obama, versus who he was when he was actually president. So he knows what he needed to do to win. He knew what his messaging needed to be. He was charismatic, he was appealing, Democratic voters loved him. That is not what Biden is experiencing right now. And I would venture to say it has very little to do with the structure of his presidential campaign, okay? I think that there's something deeper going on here, but Obama's trying, he's trying to help a brother out. I don't know if it's gonna work. Actually, if I had to bet money on it, I would say, messing around with the structure of Biden's re-election campaign ain't it. It's not gonna make that much of a difference. So we'll see, but Julie Chavez Rodriguez, Biden's campaign manager, is based at the campaign headquarters in Biden's hometown of Wilmington, while the president's top political advisors, Anita Dunn, Jen O'Malley Dillon, Mike Donilon, and Steve Ricchetti work more than 100 miles away at the White House. And so it seems as though Biden has begun to take Obama's advice to heart. In fact, just today, it was reported that his so-called infrastructure czar, a guy by the name of Mitch Landrieu, will be moving out of the White House and into Biden's presidential campaign. And if you're unfamiliar with him, he's a former mayor of New Orleans and a former lieutenant governor of Louisiana. So apparently he is gonna move away from the Biden administration to work on behalf of Biden's campaign. And also, again, notice how Obama is hyper-focused on campaign structure as opposed to campaign messaging or policy, based on what we know from the reporting. Again, we weren't there during this meeting, during this lunch, so there's a possibility that Obama touched on messaging a little bit. But nonetheless, Obama has long harbored worries about Trump's political strength, telling Biden during a different private lunch just last summer that Trump is a more formidable candidate than many Democrats realize. And that is indeed true, especially when you look at the polling and you see that in the average of polls, Biden is still trailing by a couple of points. And remember, Trump has an incredibly loyal following. He has a friendly conservative media infrastructure backing him up. And we also have an incredibly polarized country that he uses to his advantage, especially when it comes to electoral politics. And of course, we all know that Biden is deeply unpopular, so unpopular that some Democrats are even worried about running for re-election with him at the top of the ticket. Get a load of this. Representative Elisa Slotkin, a Democrat from Michigan who is running for her state's open Senate seat, has expressed concern to allies that she may not be able to win if Biden is at the top of the ticket, according to people familiar with the conversations. A spokesman for Slotkin's campaign said that she looks forward to running with President Biden. Does she? Does she look forward to it? Come on, come on. And to be fair, she does have cause for concern. Just before year's end, Biden's rating tied his Biden's rating tied his record low, with 38% approving his performance and 58% disapproving, according to the Washington Post. Their average of 17 polls in November and December. Democrats are also concerned about Biden losing support among younger voters and communities of color due to his handling of the Israel-Gaza war. For instance, in December, and we shared this with you, a New York Times Siena College poll found that 57% of voters disapproved of Biden's handling of the Israel-Gaza war, while 33% approved. And just today, Biden's speech was interrupted by protesters calling for a ceasefire in Gaza.
Without light, there's no path from this darkness.
If you really care about the lives lost here, you should honor the lives lost and call for a ceasefire in Palestine. Ceasefire! Ceasefire!
That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. I understand their passion, and I've been quietly working. With the Israeli government to get them to reduce and significantly get out of Gaza. I'm using all that I can to do that.
That message is not persuasive to young American voters who see what's currently taking place on the ground in Gaza, who see the United States government under the leadership of President Joe Biden sending more weaponry, more bombs to Israel. In fact, just recently, Biden decided to bypass Congress altogether to send hundreds of millions of dollars of military weaponry to the IDF. And so the days of an uninformed electorate are over. Information is pouring through every avenue imaginable, whether it's online, television, radio, podcasts. People know what's going on. And so if he thinks he's gonna pull a fast one on young Democratic voters, he's got another thing coming. And Biden aides are really hanging their hat on the notion that Trump becoming the Republican nominee is actually a good thing for Biden. They're going to paint him as a threat to democracy, as you know. They think that his chaotic style will eventually persuade voters to side with Biden over Trump. And indeed, to mark the 3-year anniversary of January 6th and to kick off the Biden campaign, Biden issued a speech where he fearmongered about Trump and the threat to democracy. Let's watch.
The violence of January the 6th. And since that day, more than 1,200 people have been charged for their assault on the Capitol. Nearly 900 of them have been convicted or pled guilty. Collectively to date, they have been sentenced to more than 840 years in prison. What's Trump done? Instead of calling them criminals, he's called these insurrectionists patriots. They're patriots. And he promised to pardon them if he returns to office. Trump said that there was a lot of love on January the 6th. The rest of the nation, including law enforcement, saw a lot of hate and violence. One Capitol Police officer called it a medieval battle. That same officer was called vile racist names. He said he was more afraid in the capital of the United States of America, in the chambers, than when he was fighting as a soldier in the war in Iraq.
Now, obviously, we agree with Biden over, what happened on January 6th. It's something worthy of condemnation. But if this is going to be what he hangs his hat on as the main campaign strategy to get reelected, I'm not entirely sure it's going to work. That messaging resonates with people who already support Biden, who already intend to vote for Biden. But what happens with the individuals who voted for him in 2020, but have decided they just are not in favor of the fact that he abandoned the Voting Rights Act? He didn't even fight for it. The black voters who worked really, really, really hard to get 2 Democratic senators elected in runoff elections in 2020, due to the promise that if Democrats take control of the Senate, Biden's gonna fight for voting rights. That didn't happen. These kinds of foibles aren't small. They bother voters. It communicates to voters that you're not willing to actually follow through on your promises. But that's honestly, in the landscape of the Biden term, that's one of the smaller things, believe it or not. What's happening in Gaza really bothers young Democratic voters. Fear-mongering about Trump, fear-mongering about the destruction of democracy, I don't think is gonna work. I could be wrong, I don't know, I'm just making a prediction here. But the final thing I'll say is, when you have the Democratic National Committee refusing to hold primary elections, basically squashing any attempt for anyone to challenge Biden, how is Biden gonna then claim that he is the protector of democracy? Democracy means that voters should have options. They should get to decide, if they're Democrats, right, who the Democratic nominee should be. And considering how unpopular Biden is, the Democratic National Committee should allow for a robust primary, and they are not allowing for that. So the argument that the Democratic Party and Biden himself will protect democracy kind of, for anyone who's informed, it kind of falls flat. Biden doesn't really have much of a leg to stand on that issue. And so Biden will be forced upon us as the Democratic nominee, even while everyone knows, even while the Democratic establishment knows just how vulnerable he is, how unpopular he is, and how much support he has lost since 2020. So buckle up, it's gonna be a wild ride in 2024.
Hey, thanks for watching that video. We really appreciate it, guys. And we appreciate it if you become members, because that allows us to be independent, honest, progressive, all the things that you don't get from corporate media. And all of that is because of you guys. Hit the join button below and become one of us, become a Young Turk.